The Guided Fate Paradox is a rather unorthodox roguelike RPG. While I never played it myself, this game purports itself as the spiritual successor to ZHP Unlosing Ranger vs. Dark Death Evil Man, both of which were developed and published by Nipponichi Software. This game uses the exact same engine as the previous game I reviewed, Disgaea D2 A Brighter Darkness, also developed by the same studio. As such, it looks exactly the same. In other words, great looking sprites, bland looking environments, but accompanied by a defined and fitting art style. One important element not present in D2 are the animated portraits. Sometimes during cutscenes, the character portraits will be animated and move around. This may seem like a small detail at first, but it actually makes a bigger difference than you might think. It adds more life to the cutscenes, and honestly the animations are silky smooth. My only complaint is that there aren't enough of them, and there are more times than not where I want to see them. The animation is really nice, and I just wanted more of it. The music of the Disgaea series has always been composed by Tenpei Sato, who does a wonderful job. However, given the different tone and theme of this game, we instead have a soundtrack composed by a 5-member group known as Yosoi Taikoku, who very rarely compose music for games. I have to say though, that despite this, the music in this game is outstanding! The music in this game has such variety, ranging even from rock songs to classical music. It all sounds great, and I would go as far as to say that even if you come away with this review not interested in the game itself, I implore you, at the very least, give this soundtrack a listen. You will not be disappointed. These guys crafted an excellent soundtrack. On the voice acting side of things, it's very solid. I was particularly pleased to hear Sam Riegel do the voice of the main character, which he did a great job with. The story of this game really started off on the wrong foot, I feel. It's a very random introduction where suddenly the main character plays a lottery at a mall and then becomes God because of this. Yeah, you heard me right. I'm not making this up. You play as a teenage boy turned into God because of a lottery. This really off-the-wall intro just made me not want to take this game seriously at first. And for good reason. The premise, although interesting, starts off really badly. Thankfully, the story actually gets a lot better after the strange intro. The whole point is that the main character needs to answer prayers and wishes of people around the world using a machine called the Fate Revolution Circuit. Answering these prayers isn't always black and white situations, and actually causes the main character to think about moral dilemmas and question the prayers that he's answering. There's a surprising amount of depth here that you wouldn't expect, particularly coming from a developer who's only really known for its referential and self-aware humor. This game does have humor, by the way. It's just not as central to the cutscenes as it was in the Disgaea series. Now, while the story is actually good after the initial awkward bump at the start, the same can't be said about the characters, whom I have more mixed feelings on. While I'm fine with most of the characters, honestly, I particularly had issues with the main character and two other characters named Shiriel and Laniel. The main character is actually okay for the most part, but he does fall into this really annoying trope of, oh, I get awkward about girls and stuff. Can we please not have this tired trope just paint all JRPGs? I'm getting really sick and tired of it. It's just not funny. And Shiriel is a big reason why the main character acts like that. She just acts sexual about everything. That's her most defining characteristic, and I did not care for it. However, these are actually just nitpicks compared to the other girl, Laniel. I hate this little girl. She has this one character trait that she does almost every time she speaks. She has a secondary name for everything, and I found it incredibly annoying. Aside from them, however, I didn't actually have any major issues with the other characters. In fact, I would say that Kurelio, in particular, was my favorite of the bunch for being a cool and spunky chick. Now, first and foremost, I have to admit, I'm not very experienced with roguelike RPGs. In fact, the only one I ever played was Baroque on the Nintendo Wii, and I hated that game. So at first I was rather apprehensive about this game, given my less than favorable introduction to the genre. But thankfully, I was actually very pleasantly surprised by this game. I found it very enjoyable. One thing that threw me off at first was how every time you exit the Fate Revolution circuit where all the battles take place, your level reverts back to 1. You do retain something called a total level, which increases your base stats the more you level up. You don't retain all of the stats, but you do get back like a fraction, making you a little bit stronger each time. Another important feature in the game is the Divinogram. You mainly use this also to raise your stats and also to learn new skills that raise your proficiency with the different weapons that you equip, as well as gain different resistances. You can also upgrade your weapons and armor after you use them enough with the blacksmith. All of these elements together, despite having to revert back to level 1 every time, does give you some sense of progression. Going back to your equipment, something I found very interesting is that all of your battle skills are determined by the equipment that you wear. So this game, more than most RPGs, makes equipment very important. You may actually be forced to switch to your equipment on the fly in order to survive, which actually brings me to another point. This game's actually pretty challenging. The more the game went on, the more obstacles the game threw at me, which was definitely appreciated. Now, given the nature of the game, you'll need to grind from time to time, although it's not to the same level as the Disgaea series. The gameplay has a surprising amount of depth to it, and I'd say this is definitely one of this game's strengths. The more you play the game, it keeps introducing new elements, which I think adds a lot to the game, and makes the game more enjoyable. All in all, I was fairly pleased with this game. I'm not a fan of roguelikes, but I can definitely say that this is one that I did enjoy, and makes me want to pick up the game that it's supposedly a spiritual successor to. If you're also not a fan of this genre, I would say to give this game a chance, as it's not as brutal as the other games in this genre, while still retaining a sense of challenge and difficulty. This has been Shintai, folks. Take it easy.